Today we're going to cover parts of a castle. In today's lesson we're going to discuss the purpose of a castle and we're going to discuss the main parts of a castle. Let's begin with an introduction to castles. A castle had one or more courtyards. Now, what is a courtyard? A courtyard was oftentimes a place where the people of the castle would gather, conduct business, leisure time, free time. It would be a place where people could honestly come together as one group. Everyone ate near the Great Hall. Now, the Great Hall is oftentimes what you would see in pictures. It's very elaborate. It was oftentimes the most elaborate and upscale room in the castle itself. Castles during war were also forts. It was used for protection for the royal family. So castles were not only used for living, they were also used for places during warfare and places to protect. So we had talked a little bit about the introduction. Let's move on to the main parts of a castle. Let's talk about the outer edge of a castle. The outer edge is a curtain wall. It stretches all the way around the castle. It is 6 to 45 feet high. Because it is so high, 45 feet high at the highest point, it makes it very difficult for invaders to get over it. If you need help remembering it, remember that a curtain, oftentimes at the ends of a curtain, do not move unless you jump on it and try to bring it down. It won't just come down on its own unless you pull it or do something that makes it come down. The curtain wall is a wall that does not move. It can be made of stone. It can be made of concrete. It is a wall that does not come down unless you hit it hundreds of times. Now, over time, they came up with new techniques to get around the curtain wall, which we'll talk about more in class. Let's move on to the drawbridge. The drawbridge is the wooden bridge connected to the castle. It goes all the way up to the door. Now, oftentimes the drawbridge would be able to get raised or stay in place. When battles happen, oftentimes there was somebody at the crank for the drawbridge. When the invaders got onto the drawbridge, they would crank it to make it raise. The invaders would fall into the next part, the moat. The moat is filled with water and stakes. Now, stakes are these long posts that were curved at the end like a pencil, but they were sharpened in wood. They look like basically in the shape of a pencil, but they were sharpened to make it make the post stick out, and when you fell on them, they would basically stick into you. In some later on in history, they learned to put metal pieces on these stakes to, when you fell on them, it would damage you that much more. Not only were there stakes in the moat, there were also animals. Snapping turtles, gators, and other animals were included in the moat as well. So once you fell in, the luck of you getting out was slim to none. Let's move on to the gatehouse. The gatehouse is the top part of the door. It is a protected entrance. Oftentimes, there will be a little ledge on top of the door where armored men with bows and arrows would basically be standing here, and when they saw an invader coming up to the drawbridge, they would basically take them out. It would basically be almost like a lookout point, a little bit lower than the towers. Let's move on to portcullis. Portcullis was the spot doors that had to be raised for a person to get in, or could be pushed open later on in history. Now, once you got through the portcullis, deep into the castle is the most famous part of a castle that people relate to. It is the dungeon. The dungeon is a holding area for either prisoners or people who did bad in the area or did bad to the royal family at the time or whoever was living in the castle. Dungeon, some terror stories came out of dungeon life, torture, murder issues that happen in a dungeon. Oftentimes they wouldn't get spoke of, but there have been some oral history, some folklore that have come out of dungeon life. So today we have talked about an introduction to the castle, the purpose of a castle. We have also talked about several main parts of a castle. And this ends parts of a castle lesson for today.